Hi guys, so today we're going to do part 3 of our population ecology lecture. This part of the lecture really focuses more on human population and the trends in human population that we're seeing in recent years and in the past. So when it comes to human population growth, the population at the beginning of existence grew very, very slowly, just like most populations that later experience exponential growth. There were a lot of limiting factors back in the day to keep the population low. Food was not always readily available, so if you think about our ancestors, they were hunters and gatherers, so they had not domesticated animals or started agriculture yet. So they had to go where the food was, and it wasn't always something that they had readily available. Diseases were rampant. We did not have good medical care. And so if you had a disease, typically humans in their little settlements were living closely to each other for protection, and the diseases would travel throughout the little population. So about 500 years ago, the human population began growing at a really fast rate. So here's all that really slow growth in human history, and then all of a sudden, oh, there's the plague. Bad days there. All of a sudden, we had this huge influx in breeding, because this is exponential growth. But some things happen around this. What'll be interesting is to see what COVID does to our population if we'll have another blip there again. The beginning of agriculture and industry made life much easier and safer. All of a sudden, we had a ready supply of food, and with industry became some safer jobs, and people started to move into cities where they had access to medical care. So regular food, some medical care, goods started being shipped around the world, so those who had not could get some. We had improved sanitation and living conditions, and that started to eliminate high levels of disease. Now, these things didn't happen quickly. They happened slowly over time. So as the population first started increasing, things were still really nasty. Then you had people moving into cities before you have good sanitation, and stuff got really gross at first, and that's why diseases like the plague ran through populations, because then the rats were everywhere because they didn't have good sanitation. And it was when there was a lot of people and they realized that not having good sanitation was a real problem that they started inventing solutions to this, right? So once that occurred, people started really, really reproducing, and your death rate dropped and your birth rate increased. In the past, people had a lot of children because the odds of all of them surviving were pretty slim. So they had a lot of children so that they would land up with some that made it to adulthood, and those children would help to support the older parents. They also lived on farms, so the more children they had, the more help they would have on the farms. As people moved into cities and the population increased, they were still having lots of kids because that's what they were used to doing. But all of a sudden, most of those kids were surviving to adulthood, and the population grew very, very quickly. After a while, people have slowly started having less and less children until today, at the current rate in the United States, people are having less than 2 children per married couple. So, and we're going to talk about what that means in a little bit. So as a result, the human population is experiencing exponential growth. The human population cannot continue to grow in this manner. All right, it will just overtax our systems, and that's what we're already starting to see evidence of. The resources on our planet are limited. There is only so much food, clean water, and space available. At this point, we're having to take that space away from other species. So questions we need to answer as a species is, when will we reach the limit of these resources? Environmentalists and environmental scientists have often predicted what number humans would cap off at, when we would reach our carrying capacity, and they have been wrong time and time again, because human ingenuity, our ability to face these lack of resources, has kept our population growing. When we did not have enough food, we created genetically modified food that in one plant would create much, much more food than what plants used to make in the past. When we run out of space, we start to develop skyscrapers that can house many, many more people with significantly less land footprint. And we've even come up with some solutions for finding fresh water. So human ingenuity keeps moving this number up. So as long as we don't destroy our food chains and our food webs by interrupting other species on our planet, who knows where the limit is, where the true carrying capacity is for humans. So how large exactly will this population get? No one knows. And will the planet be able to support this huge human population? Now that's the biggest question, is how much damage can we do before the world's ecosystem goes into a catastrophic spiral? So what we look at when we're studying human populations is demographics. So demographics of human populations include a lot of things. Some countries today have a much higher growth rate than other countries. So like I said, in the United States, we're having less now than 2 offspring per family unit per married couple. But in other countries, it is not the same. And it is not the same for all families. That's an average. Some people have no children, and some people have 5, 6 children. So birth rates, death rates, the age structure, which we're going to learn how to read, of a population help predict why some countries have a higher growth rate than other countries. It also can show where the problems are occurring in controlling human populations. So here's a map of the world's countries by total population, with darker shading indicating larger populations. So if you go into the Asian countries, including India, you can see that there is a very high concentration of human population there. All right. The United States is on the high end, but we're more in the moderate range. We're not quite as high as India. We have less people than India and less than many Asians per space. But we have a pretty large population. And then if you look into Canada, Canada has significantly less than us. And if you look into Africa here also. And then if you look into Australia, they have a fairly small population per the amount of land that they have. So in many countries, such as us, Japan, and much of Europe, the growth rate has slowed. So we have completed what is called the demographic transition. And this is a dramatic change in the birth and death rates that usually follow when you have an industrial revolution. So we had our industrial revolution quite some time ago. India is going through it right now, so their population is still growing rapidly but starting to slow. And many Asian countries have already gone through it as well. So as society becomes more modern, there's a higher educational level. With higher educational levels, people typically have fewer children. There might be many reasons for this. One is just that females are being educated, and so we're spending more time going to school than just being housewives and having a bunch of children. So with that schooling, we typically have careers, and so most women don't want to come home to 49 children after they worked all day. So when we look at age structure diagrams here, you'll notice that one side, this is the male side over here, and this is the female side. So they separate the two sexes. And if you look at the age groups are on the side here, and so you can see obviously in this one, there are way more young people than there are old people. And you do expect with the human species that when you get up to 80 above, that the population does get very, very much smaller because we just don't live that long. So the growth of a population depends on how many people make up the given population. It also is dependent on the age group of those individuals. So we predict the population growth based on these age structure diagrams. If you have many, many more young people than older people, these older people are going to die off after a while, and all these young people will move up. And it is the young people that then go have more children. And so your pyramid continues, and it can continue to get wider as well. So here are some age structure diagrams for different countries. And so here's the United States right here in the middle. So if you look at the United States, from the time this is a couple of years old, but it's still pretty good. You could see that as we get older, obviously our population dies off, more males than females. Females live a little bit longer than males do. And here we have this lump right here. What this lump is, this is the baby boomer generation. When people came home from the war and they had a bunch of kids. So my mother is part of the baby boomer population, and she's one of 5 children from when my grandfather came home from the war. Since then, the United States has been fairly steady, all right? This means that we're kind of close, our population is kind of stable. It's not growing or shrinking. But in more recent years, we have started to see just a tiny bit of shrinkage with our population getting a little smaller, and we're starting to look more like Italy, all right? So when we look at Italy's here, they were a pyramid shape, and then all of a sudden, they started having less young people. So when these guys grow up and get to breeding age and they're in the middle, they're not only going to be able to have so many children, and this population will decrease over time. Now, if we look at Afghanistan, they have a very different situation. In Afghanistan, they're not living as old as us, right? It's a very dangerous place to live, not as good a health care as in other countries, but they're having tons of kids, right? So the women they look for women to have a lot of sons, and so they just keep having kids. And so here you see a very large population of young people. And so over time, you can predict that this population is going to grow, this one's going to stay more stable or slightly shrink, and this one is going to shrink. Okay, so here we go. Age structure diagrams show the population of a country broken down by gender and age group. Each bar in the diagram represents individuals within a 5-year range. Males are shown to the left of the center line, and females are shown to the right of the center line, and it's clearly labeled at the top there which side is male and female. Okay, so if we look at the age structure of population B, all right, there are nearly equal numbers of individuals in each age group down here at the bottom. We got a little lump, just like in the United States, but we're getting fairly equal down here. So you can reasonably predict that population B will experience either slow or steady growth in the future because they're not having as many children. Now, if we look at A, there are many, many more children than there are older groups. Okay, this is like Afghanistan. So in each higher age group, there are fewer and fewer individuals. And so we can predict that this population will experience rapid growth as a large number of children reach adulthood and then have children of their own.